have built about themselves, an internal panic begins that they cannot articulate, cannot understand, and cannot regulate. So they externalize it, they project it, they weaponize it. And the way they weaponize it tells you everything about how much power you have already reclaimed without even realizing it. Because the truth is, a narcissist who feels secure in their control does not perform. They do not chase. They do not escalate. They sit comfortably in the silence of your obedience. It is only when that obedience cracks, only when you become unreadable to them, that the mask begins to slip and the real creature beneath it begins to show itself. The first behavior that reveals the narcissist is afraid of you is sudden, intense, almost theatrical charm. After months or years of coldness, criticism, and contempt, they suddenly remember every soft thing you ever loved. They become attentive in ways that feel both familiar and strangely unfamiliar. They bring up shared memories. They reference your dreams. They reignite the early version of themselves that originally lured you in. This is not love returning. This is what trauma specialists call hoovering, and it is one of the clearest signs that they have detected a shift in your emotional gravity. They sense, even before you consciously do, that you are pulling away. Because their identity is built around being the center of someone else's universe, they will do anything, say anything, become anyone, to drag you back into the orbit they constructed around themselves. The charm is not a gift. The charm is a confession that they have lost the grip they once had. The second behavior is rage, and not ordinary rage. It is a specific, cold, calculated, intrusive rage that surfaces when their other tactics begin to fail. When charm does not pull you back, when guilt does not bend you, when fear no longer paralyzes you, the narcissist often unleashes a kind of psychological assault designed to shatter your composure. They will say the cruelest things they have been saving. They will weaponize your insecurities, your past, your family, your appearance, your trauma. They will attempt to make you feel like the version of you they spent years constructing in your mind. Because if they can make you cry, if they can make you defend yourself, if they can make you react, then they have succeeded. Your reaction is their oxygen. Your emotional collapse is their proof that they still own a part of you. And when you refuse to give them that reaction, when you respond with the stillness of someone who has finally stopped explaining themselves to people who never intended to understand, something inside them breaks in a way they cannot repair on their own. The third behavior is obsessive monitoring. The sudden appearances, the strange messages from unknown numbers, the mutual friends who begin asking questions that feel too specific, the social media accounts that view your stories at odd hours, the way they seem to know things they should not know. This is not love. This is not concern. This is surveillance. And surveillance is the language of someone who has lost direct access and is desperate to restore it through indirect means. A narcissist who is in control does not need to monitor you. They already know you will return. They already know you will apologize. But a narcissist who senses they are losing you transforms into something almost unrecognizable because their inner world cannot tolerate the existence of a version of you that lives, breathes, and thrives outside their reach. The fourth behavior is the smear campaign, and this one wounds survivors more deeply than almost any other. Because just as you are gathering the strength to step away, you begin to hear that they have been telling people you are unstable, dramatic, mentally unwell, abusive, manipulative, cold, or unfaithful. They take the very traits of their own behavior and project them onto you with a precision that feels almost supernatural. But understand this, the smear campaign is not about destroying your reputation. It is about controlling the narrative before you have the chance to speak your truth. It is preemptive damage control. It is the panicked behavior of someone who knows that the story you could tell, if you ever felt safe enough to tell it, would dismantle the carefully curated image they have spent a lifetime building. The louder they smear, the more terrified they are of your voice. The faster they spread their version, the more powerful your silence has already become. The fifth behavior is the sudden transformation. They go to therapy, they find religion, they quote self-help books, they post about growth, healing, and accountability. They reach out with a letter that reads like the perfect apology you waited years to hear. And here is where so many survivors collapse back into the cycle because the apology feels real, the change feels real, the remorse feels real. But trauma-informed psychology teaches us something critical. A narcissist does not transform when they feel remorse. A narcissist transforms when they feel exposed. The change is not internal, it is strategic. It is performative accountability designed to neutralize your awakening. It is a mask wearing a new mask. And the proof is always in the consistency, because real transformation is quiet, slow, uncomfortable, and does not require an audience. False transformation is loud, sudden, public, and always conveniently aligned with the moment you began to leave. The sixth behavior is triangulation, and this one is perhaps the most psychologically violent of them all. They suddenly mention someone new. They flaunt a new admirer, a new partner, a new version of the life they used to share with you. They want you to feel replaceable. They want you to feel forgotten. They want you to feel as though the love they withheld from you is now being poured generously into someone else. But what they are really doing is testing your nervous system. They are checking whether jealousy, fear, or insecurity can still pull you back into the gravitational field of their approval. The new person is not loved. The new person is being used the same way you were used. The new person is currently inside the version of the cycle you have already escaped. And when the narcissist parades them in front of you, it is not a sign of their happiness. It is a desperate signal flare, a final attempt to reach the part of you that used to flinch at the thought of being unwanted. If everything you are hearing right now is resonating with something deep inside you, pause for just one moment. Like this video, leave a comment with one single word that describes how you feel right now. And subscribe to this channel if you are committed to the kind of healing that does not just numb the pain, but transforms it into wisdom, strength, and unshakable self-respect. Your engagement is a declaration that you are choosing yourself, perhaps for the first time in a very long time. When we talk about the demonic spirit of a narcissist, we are not speaking literally. We are speaking symbolically, the way trauma survivors have always spoken about the darkness they could feel but could not name. That word captures something clinical language often fails to capture. It describes the consuming, suffocating, identity-erasing presence of toxic control. It describes the way narcissistic abuse does not just hurt you, but seems to invade you, occupy you, and convince you that the voice in your head criticizing your every move is your own voice when it is actually theirs. That is the darkness we are talking about. That is the spirit that begins to retreat when you stop feeding it with your fear. Because every manipulation tactic, every projection, every silent treatment, every gaslighting episode was a transaction. They took something from you, and you, often without knowing it, gave it. The moment you stop giving, the moment you stop explaining, defending, reacting, and shrinking, the entire architecture of their control begins to crumble. They sense it before you do. They feel it in the texture of your silence. They hear it in the calmness of your voice. They see it in the eyes that no longer beg for their approval. And this is the moment they become most dangerous, but also most revealing. Because a narcissist faced with an emotionally independent survivor will cycle rapidly through every tool in their psychological arsenal. They will love bomb, they will rage, they will guilt, they will threaten, they will play the victim, they will accuse you of being the narcissist, they will weaponize your own healing language against you. They will tell you that you have changed, that you have become cold, that the trauma has hardened you. And here is the truth no one tells survivors loudly enough. Yes, you have changed. You were supposed to change. The version of you that tolerated abuse was not your true self. She was a survival adaptation. He was a coping mechanism. That earlier self was the version of you that learned to disappear in order to stay safe. And the person emerging now, the one with boundaries, with discernment, with stillness, with the ability to walk away without explanation. That is not a hardened version of you. That is the original you, finally returning home to a body that is finally safe enough to hold her, safe enough to hold him. Notice how the narcissist never mourns who you were before the abuse. They only mourn who you were during the abuse. They miss the version of you that apologized for things you did not do. They miss the version of you that questioned your own memory. They miss the version of you that softened your truth so they would not feel threatened. They miss the version of you that abandoned yourself in order to keep them comfortable. When that version of you dies, the narcissist grieves not because they loved you, but because they have lost the only version of you they knew how to control. That grief is not love. That grief is withdrawal. That grief is the desperate longing of a system that has lost its supply. And here is what I want every survivor watching this to understand on the deepest level possible. Your healing is not just personal. It is structural. It dismantles a system that has been operating in your life, sometimes for generations. When you refuse to react, you break a pattern. When you refuse to explain, you break a pattern. When you refuse to defend yourself against people who have already decided to misunderstand you, you break a pattern. When you choose silence over engagement, peace over chaos, truth over performance, presence over panic, you are not just leaving a relationship, you are leaving a paradigm. You are leaving an entire way of existing in the world that was never yours to begin with. And the narcissist senses this. They feel the seismic shift in your inner world even when you say nothing. They know, in a way they cannot articulate, that they have lost access to the part of you they once owned. That is why their behavior becomes more extreme, more erratic, more theatrical. They are not performing because they are powerful. They are performing because the audience has finally stood up and walked out of the theater. So when you see the rage, recognize it as fear. When you see the charm, recognize it as desperation. When you see the smear campaign, recognize it as panic. When you see the sudden transformation, recognize it as strategy. When you see the triangulation, recognize it as a signal flare. When you see the obsessive monitoring, recognize it as the behavior of someone who has lost what they thought they owned. None of these behaviors are signs of strength. All of them are confessions of weakness wearing the costume of control. And the more clearly you see this, the more impossible it becomes for them to ever manipulate you again. Because manipulation requires a victim who does not understand what is happening. And you, right now, in this very moment, are no longer that person. There is a stillness that comes after the storm of awakening. A stillness that feels strange at first because your nervous system has been calibrated to chaos for so long. Peace feels suspicious. Calm feels unfamiliar. Quiet feels like the warning before something terrible. But over time, that stillness becomes a home you build inside yourself. A home no one can enter without your permission. A home where your thoughts are your own, where your feelings are not weaponized against you, where your past does not define your worth, and where your future is no longer hostage to anyone else's emotional weather. This is the freedom they feared you would find. This is the version of you they tried to prevent from ever existing. This is the self they buried beneath years of conditioning, criticism, and control. And here you are, still breathing, still standing, still becoming. The very fact that you are listening to these words right now is proof that something inside you refused to die, no matter how hard they tried to convince you to disappear. Remember this, and let it live inside you like a quiet flame that no one can ever extinguish again. The greatest fear of a narcissist is not being hated. It is not being exposed. It is not even being abandoned. Their greatest fear is losing access to someone they can no longer control. Because without that access, without that supply, without that mirror, they are forced to sit